welcome back to the Run a Show. We have an extra special show for you today. We're going to be talking about virtual events. Everything you want to know about virtual events. What they are now, what clients want them to be, what the economics are behind them. And finally, we're going to talk about how these virtual events that we're going to see developing right now and coming to fruition, how they're going to affect events moving forward. We're going to have to look into our crystal ball for that one. Today we have a special guest, Itamar Kubovy, dialing in on the internets. Itamar Kubovy has a resume that's just unbelievable. As a Yale graduate, he has run theaters in Sweden, Germany, and the United States. He's also directed a season finale, co-directed a season finale of The West Wing. That's a pretty big deal. He's produced he produced the movie Upheaval, and right now he's the executive producer of Pilobolus and a partner at Virtual Live Labs Studio, Live Labs for short. Really excited to have you on the show today. And also to help us, Sherry Huss. Now, she's a friend of the show, and she's a friend of mine and a mentor, and I think Sherry is probably most famous for being the co-founder and really the person running the show at the Maker Faire, which started here in the Bay Area and branched off to become not only an international organization, an international event, but also a movement and a tribe. So we couldn't have better guests today to talk about what's happening with virtual events and where this might go than the couple innovators we have. So Sherry, how are you?
I'm great, Jonathan. Thank you for having us on Run a Show.
Itamar, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
Thanks so much, Jonathan, for letting me be a part of this experiment. It's a great deal of fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's super fun. Thank you for coming. We're going to get right into it because we all know that basically due to the conditions in the market right now, the only option we have is for events and conferences is virtual events and conferences. So let me start with, and either one of you can take this question, what are virtual conferences and producers even doing right now? Sherry, I think that you should grab this one.
Well, that's a good question. Itamar and I started, along with another member, started Live Lab Studio to really look at what was happening in the space. And back in March, when things were moving quickly and people had 5 days to take a live event to virtual, we really found that people pretty much embraced and just, again, being a part of being in the event world, really just kind of adopted, okay, we're going to take this, we're going to take it online, and we don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to get it done. And so we spent time with two groups. One is the folks from Lego. They did the Lego user conference and the Big Idea conference. And it actually was interesting to see that they split it into two tracks and they did main stage. And then the more interesting area for me was actually in breakouts where they did 24-hour programming. They held actually contests that they had people tag things with hashtags so that they could share. And then we spent time studying Open Hardware group where they did the Open Hardware Summit, their 10th anniversary. And for me, the most interesting thing was that they spun up a Discord server and enabled their community to interact while the conference was going on. So those were early groups, and they actually did some pretty innovative things with very little time and not a whole lot of money. Other event companies that we're talking to are doing more traditional things. They're trying to figure it out. They're focusing on content. They're trying to figure out community. And it's still a little bit of Wild West out there. And I'll let Itamar share a little bit more.
Yeah, it's hard to know. These things change. Your opinion about everything these days, at least mine does, changes every 3 minutes. So it's really hard to know exactly where things are going before you start thinking that it's all going exactly the different way than you thought it was going to go on Monday and it's only Thursday. So everything is a caveat here. But that said, I think the core issue here, of course, is you're dealing with somehow getting an audience engaged. That's the bottom
That is-
line. That's true of every single event and every single place. That's the job, right? That's the problem to solve. And you got a set of tools and a set of constraints.
Yeah.
And the rest is open, it's open for anything. Like, those are the only rules right now.
Yeah.
And we know a million models that we could borrow from, look to say that, well, that worked over there and that worked over there and that worked over there. But in a way, part of our jobs right now is to kind of understand that almost even the idea of virtual is maybe not the right word, because you're ultimately trying to figure out how to keep contact with your community when everyone can't leave the house.
Yes.
And luckily, we've got some incredible tools. I mean, even the technology that you're using right now to broadcast that we've been looking at as we've been sort of preparing to do this, like, wait a minute, there's a website that basically allows you to be a TV studio.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff out
Website,
there.
and you suddenly realize there's a website that's allowing me to be a TV studio, and you guys are actually doing a full-on TV broadcast, putting one together with essentially entirely virtual tools.
Absolutely. So back to your question, back to your comment, Sherry. You're talking about the discussions and the breakouts, the ability to have like an open group. I think that to me it sounds like we're solving the biggest problem of how do we get engagement among like attendees. Could you kind of tell us a little bit more about how that worked out and like what platform you used?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the open hardware team, and they actually solved it, in my opinion, the best way. I think the night before, they told us that they decided to set up a Discord server. And Discord's, for folks that don't know, it's really like a gaming platform that's used to communicate. Probably something similar. Twitch has it, Slack has it, but it's really a place where community can go and gather.
Yeah.
And just like being at a live event, you want to talk to your peers about what's going on. The cool thing is that we learned from them, and they didn't know what was going to happen. I think they set up like 11 different rooms. The smart thing they did was get moderators, because they couldn't necessarily be there. So the moderators were making sure people were in the right rooms and chatting. But some of the cool things that were happening is, like, once a keynoter or once a general session speaker is done, they could jump into a Discord channel and start having a conversation with people that cared about what they were doing. That continued on, and I check in occasionally, and there are still people like 3.5 months after the event that are engaging with each other. And I think that engagement from a bottoms-up approach is really key. And I don't know if a lot of companies quite get that, but it's really the essence. And I think Itamar and I were talking, it's almost like even a Reddit, if you will. Like, you find what you're interested in, and you find your community, and you find your tribe. And if companies can actually start building that in, and it's not just the chat bar and the box, because that doesn't take and build a deep relationship. It's just of the
definitely
moment.
not.
It's kind of like an O, and you try to copy it, and then you're on to the next. This is just a place to go. It's like a town square community gathering point virtually.
So we were on a personal call yesterday, Sherry, and we were talking about, how we could bring networking back to these events, because when you think about going to a conference, you want to meet people, you want to expand your network, and you're talking about this Discord giving people like the beginning of a relationship that's lasting 3 months and counting. I guess the big question is, and either one of you guys can grab this, is what API is most likely to be the API to whatever platform we're using that's going to be most successful? Is it like LinkedIn, or what do you think is going to work?
It's interesting, because I feel like there used to be a huge emphasis in the industry on production value. Quality was akin to production value. Like, if something was really top level, it just showed you put a ton of energy and thought into the design and the detail and the execution. Feels like in the last few months, the only thing people want is a rock solid platform that shows you people's faces and lets you hear their voices. Like, once you get that and you can rely on it, everyone exhales. And everything on top of that is really content dependent. Like, if you have a rock solid pipe that just lets the picture look good, and the sound be heard, the rest almost goes away and really relegates itself to content. Because content is what, and whether it's jokes or intelligence or a certain atmosphere of inclusiveness, whatever the thing is that's making your place appealing to people, and eventually your event appealing to people, has to start happening virtually, has to start happening on those servers, has to start happening in every interaction that we have. That starts our gang, build our tribe around what we're doing. And then the event becomes just a fulfillment of a 365-day relationship with that group.
Yeah. So it's fundamentally you need a solid platform and solid pipes and the ability to communicate like it's second nature and not like hiccups and glitches and power outages and it's stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, the power outages make the whole experience almost like more informal. Like,
yeah,
we're all struggling with the reality of the situation. No one's thinking that the fact that you just had a power outage is in any way a reflection on the level of work you guys do.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that we're in a pandemic trying to broadcast television like across the, planet.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
So there's a very different threshold, and tolerances are very different for audiences. And if the content is genuine and authentic, people will put up with anything.
So I think this would be a good time. Like somehow we managed to cover all of the talking points for like, hey, what's happening right now? Is there anything that you're seeing from your Wait, are your clients that are asking you questions about doing their virtual, taking their meetings or their conferences to virtual? Is there anything that they're asking for, or are they looking for you to be like the waiter and suggest things like off of like today's special is now that pairs really well with a Pinot Noir? Is it more of a you're pushing your ideas with them and trying to pair them with like the social plugins, or is it more that they're saying we need this functionality and we need it now?
We're actually with Live Labs, we're holding conversations with innovators, and we're just trying to share their knowledge. So we're really trying to take a temperature on what they're feeling and what's important to them and what they're learning. We've heard on the tech side, everyone's struggling around platforms, and a lot of it's due to supply and demand and what's available, and that seems to be a whole kind of a wild west. And it kind of reminds me back in the day when we were looking at ticketing platforms. I think there's probably too many choices now with too many unknowns. And it's kind of like where an Eventbrite came in and really actually even worked closely with us at Maker Faire and came up with a platform that delivered what I needed.
Yeah.
So I think that there's still opportunity there. And it's hard to say because there's just the demand for it is all at once. It's like the pipeline's been opened. So it's a little tricky there. But we're learning people like are figuring out content a little bit differently. Everything from larger companies that are looking at more of a broadcast model to companies that are trying to figure out, well, the keynote can't be just the regular keynote. Do what you need to do in 15 minutes or 12 minutes or 8 minutes. Get to the point and get to the point quickly. That's a whole thing too.
Yeah, the TED model. Make it concise for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and we learned surprisingly, I think, that one of the things that actually seems to be better is the impact of engagement in a digital setting where you can go into a chat room with a speaker or a keynote speaker and actually get not FaceTime, but virtual FaceTime in a way that you would never be able to do if you were in a live conference. So there's a certain kind of content and a certain kind of access that actually is working better in this setting and is actually letting people feel like they got more out of that than they thought they would otherwise. That's surprise number one. Surprise number two, and I think the jury is still hugely out, is we got to remember that all these events are really, really fueled fundamentally by the transactions that take place at them.
Yeah.
Right? The core income for all of these events in the kind of corporate and association event industry has to do with the deals made at those events. And even though everyone is seeing double the registration that they used to, the great unknown question in the room is, with double the registration, are you going to do double the business, the same amount of business, or half the business that you usually do? And that's going to be a really interesting sort of whole new set of tactical and strategic questions that we're still really not clear about how to deal with, because we haven't yet seen, as we're sort of inventing this going along. And I don't just mean us, I mean everyone who's doing this right now is kind of in flying by the seat of their pants. I think we're going to have a lot of learning, and a lot of the virtual stuff can be measured, which is one of the other great things about it. So you really get pretty hard numbers on what's going on.
Yes, and in fact, the way that you just broke that down with like double the people there and how much business is going to come out of that, I mean, so I guess it would be one if twice as many people are there and they're getting half the value or half of the connections or making half of the spider effect, the web effect, then the answer would be exactly the same if these people can figure out how to engage in those platforms. Now, I'm going to use this
exactly right
as a great point to segue into next. We're going to talk about like kind of the economics, because you were just talking about our whole next section, and I'm going to monologue it for a second. I'm going to get through it in like 30 seconds, because it's going to lead into the next question, which is what's going to happen once like live events come back. So basically, you just covered a lot of this, but all the from an economic standpoint, all of the economic points we're about to cover are contingent on virtual production companies, agencies, and or platforms nailing the virtual experience, right? So virtual events are much less. We know that virtual experiences are less expensive to produce. We also know this is because you don't need the venue, the catering, the snacks and coffee, alcohol costs, union labor, hotels, flights, and local travel. Those are all out. You don't need any of that anymore. All you need is bandwidth and stuff that can be done in a small studio like Production Line Studios here, and with software that helps the people virtually come in. And so the next point is that since virtual events are clearly more scalable and less expensive to produce, the prices will naturally come down, right? Which will lower the barriers to entry, not only to go to the event, but it'll lower the barrier to entry for getting event-specific knowledge, and maybe walking away with some valuable connections from that event. So that's good. So again, all of this will be true if and only if, we're going to get logical here, if and only if the event industry can nail the virtual experience. So we're assuming that we nail the virtual experience, this little segment will make up a little stinger, is what we call crystal ball. Virtual events / hybrid events, which are live events with the virtual experience, like what's going to happen to regular events, and how will the things that we learn now affect the future? Are the events going to go away? So, Itamar,
I'll start.
Yeah, let's start. Okay, Sherry, sorry.
Events aren't going away. I mean, they will come back. They're not going to come back at the level of 100,000, 200,000 people. It's going to be a gradual increase, but it's going to be a more appropriate audience.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a digital version now, because all of our event marketers are now facing the fact that they need to become digital marketers. And that's a big, quite frankly, they could have probably done this before. They just didn't have the need to push them. But everything now is going to become measurable. And the statistic we've heard is that 20% of the business, or 20% of the people bring in 80% of the business at most events. So that means that companies are going to actually be able to have a deeper, more focused experience with the people that are bringing in business. And they're also going to be able to cast a wider net to those that are actually potentially interested to kind of build their ecosystem. So my sense, we're going to be living in virtual digital events are going to be with us for a long time. They're working now. Like, it's easy to pull people together, and we're seeing it in schools, we're seeing it at work, in an office. There's no reason that it can't work in an event environment. Event marketers are going to have to get more creative at how they package experiences for attendees online. They will, and they'll get to know their audience better. So that's my take. And Mark, you have ideas too here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question really is, will they come back? And I guess my thinking recently has been that, of course, events will come back because people like to hang out, and there's no doubt that hanging out with people is more fun than Zooming with people. Like, it just is. But at the same time, I think you can get a huge amount done that we didn't think we needed to get, that we could get done virtually. You can get done virtually. So it really requires, when that event comes back, one, it will be on a continuum with a live event, with a virtual event. It won't be its own separate activity. And ultimately, it will be controlled by the energy of the digital and virtual community, finding a desire to meet, rather than the meeting that has some digital backup with some marketing on social. So I feel like, in a way, the tail's going to wag the dog. And if you can get in on that community digitally, then suddenly the emergence of what the live events are is going to happen organically. That's one. And two, I think those events are always going to use media to actually increase their impact. So that rather than having live events that require 150,000 people, you'll have an unbelievably exclusive live event that involves 300 people, but you'll photograph it and film it in a way that it will get distributed through the digital media to then another 3 million people. So there's going to be this kind of play between the live and the digital community that, if it gets leveraged right, will sort of create those wow, must-see, appointment kind of moments. And they'll be real live moments, but they will only provide real live access to the most exclusive clientele that is going to be conducting the maximal amounts of transacting. And the rest of it, you're going to just try to provide that community support at home. So I think it's going to end up being not just about how much is digital, how much is live, but how does the business model start incorporating those different channels in an orchestrated way to be able to get the most and give the most to the customer.
I hear you guys, and I just want to drop in with your point, Sherry. I'm just imagining like Miley Ray Cyrus riding a wrecking ball into the status quo of what the event industries are and just blowing up. And just to kind of like expand upon what you just said, Itamar, is like, you got to think about, I'm thinking about the reason why right now, the reason why they have a live audience at all with Jimmy Fallon, and this will or could segue into your recent blog article, but the only reason we have a live audience on Jimmy Fallon or any of those late night shows is to get the applause, so you don't have to do it in a canned way. So like the live audience could just be a prop, like just like they are on all other media, in a way where you're kind of like holding up applause signs to make it exciting, because it just, without us adding the laughs in post production, it's just not funny. I'm gonna send that back to you, Itamar.
Excellent. I mean, in a funny way, I feel like we got this thing going where there's nothing like someone saying, "I was there when."
Right.
And we got to get back to that question of, what does "I was actually there when the Stones did the concert with"? Like, what does that mean? That's to mean a chunk of your life happened and you were there. So I feel like that's the top of the iceberg. And we basically have to structure according to experience in a way that really manages to cascade down from, oh my God, I was there on the top of Everest when, all the way down to sort of what that experience is for the larger community. And I think that energy has to come from the bottom up rather than from the top down.
Right.
I agree. And I'm going to say, even like right now with all of the protests and the activism in the country, there are tools, like we were talking about this, like Google, collaborative Google Docs, Google Sheets. And that the bottom up actually is in a pretty great position to start even dictating what some of these events look like. And even, in some cases, there are people in the audience that knows more than the speaker, right? We're able to now
all the time.
speak. I mean, you've got a room full of people that if that's their beat and that's their subject, they're into it. So we now actually are able, and this is kind of this whole power of tribes, we're able to pull together people in ways that they may never have been able to come together at a live. And that's the power. But by meeting and being together all year, 365 days, when they do come together, it's going to be magical.
Yeah.
And that's kind of future that we can look forward to kind of help creating. And that's kind of the silver lining in this whole crazy.
Right. It's almost like the tagline is like, it's not a conference anymore. It's a reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around all this perspective that you guys are giving me. It just really seems like that you're painting this picture of, it's like, it just makes it even more exclusive for the people who are blessed to be in the audience. So it's like the being in the audience thing is even more special. It's not just something that you're doing, and it's also that experience of having really enthusiastic people in the room is creating an even better environment for the home viewers. We're hoping to get that opportunity for like the whole virtual experience, and then you really pay like everything based on all the conversations I've had with you, Sherry, and with you Itamar, is basically talking about not just the end user in some generic way, but like the end user and how you're going to set up a really like the best platform for them to engage with each other and create like meaningful relationships, meaningful experiences. And yeah, that's why I'm glad that we got such a great opportunity to have you on the show. Like you guys
think like if it's your kid, if you know someone, if it's your kid doing something, jumping over a stick, it's incredible. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
When your 3-year-old jumps over a stick, you're just like, oh my God, I got to tell everybody and send this video to 400 people. And they're all going to write back like, oh my God, that was the most incredible thing. And like, it was just a 3-year-old jumping over a stick, but somehow it's the relationship that makes that piece of content meaningful.
to expand upon that, Itamar, I just want you to say, oh my God, my kid just jumped over, my 3-year-old just jumped over a stick, and then just go. Please do that for me.
My 3-year-old just jumped over a stick.
Oh my God, that's fucking amazing, Itamar. we're gonna put some post in and cut out the direction there. So that we've covered like, I would say that you guys have just given me like more reference than a lot of these webinars that are circulating out there. Like, no offense to anybody's webinars, there's good information for people who are just trying to figure it out from the ground up, but your expertise is kind of like the next level of just looking at this like true creatives and just academics and creatives and people who really understand, I mean, building tribes and the creative world like at a very, very high level. So that brings us, we've covered the what's up now, we've covered the like the economics and what if, what's going to happen later. All we have left is to cover one cool things. Do either of you what's your one cool things that's happened lately in this terribly depressing world that we're living in right now?
I'll jump in on that one, which is that my daughter, as obviously we live in New York City, and my daughter goes to high school. She's a junior. She was asked to the prom as a junior, big accomplishment. And then it was all canceled, no more prom, until a couple of guys in her class rebuilt the school in Minecraft and basically got the entire prom to take place in Minecraft with them. As everyone has an avatar, they go as dates, they dress up, they do the whole thing. There's a soundtrack, a server allowing them all to chat the whole time. And they've somehow created this unbelievable use of a virtual platform and figured out a way to pack a huge amount, again, of emotion and relationship into it in a way that I think is just a testament to actually how real things happen that get real fanatical commitment from people because it comes from them.
Yeah.
The platform was there, but the energy came from them. And I think those are the kinds of things we need to look for as a way of sort of creating events that really come from an emotional and passionate place.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's no money. They just wanted to get together and they're just bored. And
exactly. It's just the simplest motive, right? I'm bored. Hey dudes, let's build this thing. So, and then the rest of it plays out from there. Yeah.
Was there any parents that logged in and saw like hack their way in to see what was happening in those breakout rooms?
No, I feel like it was super duper on there. It was their deal. Awesome. It was really their scene. Yeah.
All right.
It was awesome. It was really cool.
Sherry, what's your one cool things?
Well, my one cool thing outside of collaborating with Itamar, which is actually great because we get the East Coast, West Coast experience, is something Itamar shared with me too, which is astronaut.io. And I have to say, he'd asked me, like, Sherry, do you know about astronaut.io? And it's like, no. I went and checked it out, and I encourage everyone to do it. It's a site that has been built around actually kind of an algorithm pulling all the YouTube videos that have like 1 or 0 views, and they give you just kind of runs through. See a lot of accordions in there, and it's just a great kind of like palate cleanser, just take you right out of the crazy world that we're in. So I like that a lot. And can I have one cool thing?
Oh, we can't have enough cool things. We can't have enough cool things.
Okay, well, I think, this one, because we've got the creator with us, is the Cameron. We're going to throw this to Itamar to explain to you. It's a passion project that Itamar started with a group of folks, and I'm lucky to have a little part in it. But Itamar, why don't you share that? Because I think it's definitely a very cool thing and of our time.
So basically, we just were talking a lot over the Zoom these days, these months, and realized that it would be really, you start getting really curious when you realize people are popping out at 7 p.m. to clang and cling and clap for the medical workers, but you realize they're in there all day long, every one of those windows. Someone's in there doing something. And we thought it'd be cool to build a site where you had essentially a facade of 100 windows, like a street of 100 apartments. And then asking artists all over the globe to put music fragments, cooking fragments, monologues, pieces of writing, whatever it is, but famous artists and incredible makers and creators from 6 continents. And we asked 100 of them. And we now are about to open in about a month our first building on this street block where you go, and every time you scroll over one of the windows, another name of an artist in a different country pops up, and you get to see a 1-minute video. So essentially, it's a site that hosts almost like an advent calendar of 100 kind of isolation videos from 100 artists all over the world. And it's called Decameron Row. And Sherry's husband, Joe, has been building and doing all the back end engineering, and Sherry's dealing with marketing, and we've been building the whole thing together. And friend Stephanie Sabel and writers and artists all over the world have jumped in to help us. So it's just been one of those things that's just been a connector. That's been truly a passion project. Everything is about charity and donation to people who are having a hard time with mental issues and mental health during this time of isolation. But the impulse to see into 100 windows has been a really fun project to try to get to have.
Yeah, and that sounds just incredible and impactful with that brevity, because it's, like making something that's 20 minutes long is easy, but making something that's impactful in 1 minute is just
exactly. And
hard.
It's just the thought was, when we're bored and at home and sick of being inside, just scrolling over and looking at 1-minute snippets of different things from all over the world could be a really fun thing that you could come back to, versus trying to get too involved with something any longer.
Yeah, definitely send us that. I can't wait to see where that goes. I can't wait to see the content.
Yeah, it's gonna be
We're
good.
going to do our first. We're going to release it in stages, and we're hoping to do the first release on July 7th.
July 7th. So we'll send us
right
that,
after the 4th.
And hopefully we won't be on the astronaut.io at that point, because it's a new pod. So send that, and we'll send it out to whatever network we have at that point. We're a pretty niche show anyway. So we're not trying to be like Jimmy Fallon or something. But I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you. It's been really, I just can't thank you enough for coming by the show and sharing some like really, really good insight. Like anybody who's in this world right now will definitely find good value in listening to what you had to say.
Excellent. And we're
Thanks,
glad
John.
to come
It's
back.
a pleasure.
Yeah, we're glad to come back to give us, a few more months, because I think we're learning and we're pulling together, some of the event producers and folks in big companies and associations that are kind of dealing with this, and just, again, sharing and kind of being a little bit more open source and collaborative is really what's going to get us through.
All right. I will definitely will have you back. And thanks again for coming by. Thank you, Itamar. And you guys have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
We just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for tuning into the show today. Whether you're listening to this as a podcast or watching it on a video somewhere, we appreciate you swinging by. This is a new show, really inspired by the events that are happening with the pandemic. And, we're really concerned about what's happening to the overall event industry. It's affecting a lot of people right now, so we wanted to bring you the latest and most up-to-date news about what's going on out there and just create a place where people can come together and see the headlines of what's happening with events without having to scroll through a news feed forever. So on that note, we'd also really appreciate your comments, your feedback, your suggestions. Put that reach out to us, send us a note in the comment section, and let us know who you'd like to see on a show or what subjects you'd like us to cover. I'm sure we're going to find some gold if you'd like to let us know. And finally, we would like to thank our primary sponsor, ProductionLineStudios.com. Now, ProductionLineStudios.com is just a great little agency that creates custom content for your brand, custom tailored for your brand. It's very efficient. We're in Production Line Studios right now. It's very environmentally friendly in that we have a lot of experience building, full-on sets, spending weeks designing, days building, and then having this entire set. You spend a lot of money on these sets, designing and building it, and then at the end of the show, oftentimes we try and recycle what we can, but the end of it ends up going up into a big truck into the dump. But here at Production Line Studios, you can have a higher quality set and swap out the backdrop. That's all video walls. You can custom dial in the lights, whatever you want. You can put in whatever furniture you want in here. You can brand it for your own show. Instead of putting a cityscape back there, it could be a cool banner, like you could launch your video game. You could update people on your app, like any app updates that you have, so that you can really reduce the amount of time people spend calling your call center. So it's a very efficient way for you to get people, make your app more sticky, get people deeper into your ecosystem and your applications and the updates. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to use a studio or an agency like Production Line Studios, but we sure appreciate the opportunity to be in here, and we're very thankful for the opportunity, and think that you might be too. So thank you, ProductionLineStudios.com, and thank you everybody who's tuned into our new show.